Something big is happening right now, and most Americans have no idea. The countries that have fought beside us in every major war, shared our values, our laws, our language, and our secrets, Britain, Canada, Australia, are quietly building a future that does not include us, not against us, just without us. And that difference is going to matter for the next 30 years. I am looking at a map right now, and for the first time in my life, our closest friends are not looking toward Washington. They are looking at each other. They are looking at Brussels, Beijing, and Tokyo. They are looking literally anywhere but here. Let me take you to Davos, Switzerland, January 2026, the World Economic Forum. Every year, powerful people fly in, say a bunch of feel-good nothing, and fly home. That has always been the routine. Then Mark Carney walked up to the microphone. If you do not know who Mark Carney is, pay attention. This is the man who ran the Bank of Canada, then the Bank of England. Goldman Sachs veteran, the most respected central banker of his generation. He does not do drama. He does data. He does systems. When he speaks at Davos, he means every single word, structurally. And what he said was not feel-good nothing. He said the rules-based international order is going through what he called a rupture, not a rough patch, not a reset, a rupture. He said the deal that held the Western world together, where America provided security in exchange for global cooperation, no longer works. Then he said the line that is now being repeated in foreign ministries all over the world. If we are not at the table, we are on the menu. If we are not at the table, we are on the menu. A man who has spent his entire career building financial systems just told every mid-sized democracy on earth that the United States has become a threat, not a partner. And he said it out loud, on camera, in front of everybody. But Carney did not just give a speech, he came with action. Canada is now leading negotiations between the European Union and the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. That is a 12-nation Indo-Pacific trade group that includes Canada, the United Kingdom, Japan, Australia, Mexico, Singapore, and Vietnam. Together, we are talking about a potential bloc covering 1.5 billion people and more than a third of all global trade, built completely without the United States. Think about that number. 1.5 billion people. One trade framework. Supply chains woven so tightly together that a product built using parts from Canada, Japan, and Vietnam can move across 40 countries with very little cost in tariffs. A massive economic highway that skips American ports, American banks, American rules, and American politics entirely. And this is not a proposal. This is not a tweet thread. Officials in Brussels described the European Union side of these talks as, and this is a direct quote from someone close to the discussions, super keen. Japan has signaled serious interest. German business groups are fully behind it. The political will is real and it is growing every single week. Now here is where things get even more serious. While Carney was building this new trade structure, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer got on a plane to Beijing. Not London, not Washington. Beijing. He sat down with the Chinese government and talked trade. The same Britain that has been America's single closest ally for 80 years. The same Britain whose intelligence agency GCHQ forms the backbone of the Five Eyes intelligence network. That Britain just went to China looking for new customers. And Canada did the same thing. Carney went to Beijing and struck a deal removing trade barriers on Chinese electric vehicles and Canadian canola oil. The two countries that have faced the most pressure from Trump just walked straight to his biggest rival and said, let's do business. None of this happened by accident. There is a clear cause and effect here. And when you see the full chain, you realize this was predictable. Some people in Washington even warned about it. Nobody listened. Here is how you take the most powerful alliance in modern history and tear it apart in 12 months. You just have to be Donald Trump. Start with Canada. Trump spent months calling Canada a freeloader. He threatened 25% tariffs across the board. He called Prime Minister Carney weak. He publicly suggested Canada should become the 51st state of the United States. He even demanded control of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a bridge Canada paid for, claiming the U.S. deserves ownership of infrastructure it had nothing to do with building. A U.S. Senator from Michigan, Alyssa Slotkin, warned that blocking that bridge would hurt her own state's economy. Trump did not care. The result? Canada's economy shrank 1.6% in the second quarter of 2025. Unemployment climbed above 7%. Factories cut production. A country that has been America's single largest trading partner for decades, a country that buys more American goods than any other nation on earth, was being economically choked by its supposed best friend. But Canada did not collapse. It adapted. Carney signed 12 new trade and security agreements across 4 continents in just 6 months. 12. While Trump was threatening tariffs, Carney was in Abu Dhabi securing a pledge of up to $50 billion in Canadian investment across AI and energy. He was in Europe building connections. He was in Asia opening doors. He is scheduled to visit Australia in March 2026 to strengthen what sources describe as supply chain cooperation specifically designed to function without American involvement. Trump made the kind of mistake that ends chess games. He pressured every piece on the board at the same time, and all the pieces moved. Now move to Australia. The U.S.-Australia relationship is deep: military, intelligence, cultural, historical. AUKUS, the trilateral security partnership between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, was supposed to be the foundation of Indo-Pacific strategy. Then Trump's team hit Australia with tariffs, a 10% baseline tariff on an ally, a country with which the United States actually runs a trade surplus, a country that has sent soldiers to fight alongside Americans in every major military conflict since World War I. When a U.S. Senator asked the Trump administration's trade representative why Australia was being targeted, despite the trade numbers and the alliance commitments, the answer was one of the most revealing things any American official has said in years. He said the United States should be running up the score on Australia, running up the score on an ally. That is not trade policy. That is contempt. Australian polls, and these numbers have been verified, now show that more Australians see Donald Trump as a threat to world peace than either Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping. More Australians are worried about the American president than about the Russian or Chinese president. That is a staggering collapse of trust. And when you lose Australia's trust, you do not just lose a trading partner. You lose a surveillance network that tracks Russian submarine movements across the entire Pacific and Indian Oceans. You lose intelligence stations that make American intelligence genuinely global. And Australia is watching, and Australia is rethinking everything. Here's the part that genuinely kept me up at night. CANZUK, the proposed formal alliance between Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, has gone from a niche academic concept to a serious policy platform, with support from both major political parties in all 4 countries. In Canada, both major parties have expressed formal support. In Australia, public polling shows majority backing. In the United Kingdom, support crosses both Conservative and Labour parties. A survey from April 2025 found that 57% of Canadians believe CANZUK would help protect Canada from American economic pressure. 57%. The majority of Canadians now see a formal alliance with Britain and Australia as protection from the United States. Read that again slowly, because that is a sentence that would have been completely unthinkable just 5 years ago. What we are learning is that this is not really about tariffs. Tariffs are the symptom. The real problem is trust. And trust, once broken between nations, does not come back quickly. It can take a generation. It can take longer because institutions have memory even when leaders do not. Right now, the institutional memory of America's closest allies is recording every threat, every insult, every broken promise. And they are building accordingly, not out of anger, out of necessity. Here is something most people are ignoring. The US dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has dropped from 72% in the year 2000 to under 60% today. That is a nearly 12-point drop in the dollar's worldwide dominance as the global reserve currency. And that was happening before Trump. Now add a president who has weaponized trade, pushed away allies, and made the American financial system feel like a political tool instead of neutral global infrastructure. Every time a mid-sized country routes its trade through a different system, another small fraction comes off the dollar's global standing. Death by 1,000 redirections. Let me break down why this matters on a deeper level. because I think a lot of people are watching this like it is a political drama and missing the real shift underneath. What is actually happening is a rewiring of the global economy. And the people doing the rewiring are not angry activists. They are not anti-American ideologues. They are the most technically qualified economic architects of this era. They are building a parallel system, quietly, carefully, with legal frameworks, trade rules, supply chain agreements, and currency swap arrangements that will outlast every government currently in power. Carney is the clearest example of this. He ran 2 central banks. He spent his career building the actual financial plumbing of the global system. He understands, better than almost any politician alive, that real power does not come from yelling. It comes from controlling the infrastructure through which money, goods, and resources actually flow. And now he is applying every lesson from that career to building an alternative infrastructure. Here's the technical piece that makes this truly serious: rules of origin. Rules of origin are the trade law standards that determine where a product is considered to come from for tariff purposes. If Canada and the EU align their rules of origin with the CPTPP nations, then a product assembled in Canada using parts from Vietnam and Japan can enter the entire European market at very low tariff rates, and vice versa. This is called cumulation. And what it means is that supply chains can be woven across Canada, Europe, Japan, Australia, the UK, Singapore, and Vietnam in a way that makes them functionally self-contained. You could build almost anything, cars, semiconductors, medicines, aircraft parts, entirely within this network without touching the United States once. This is not theoretical. German and British business groups are already backing these talks. Japanese officials are expressing serious interest in supply chain security through this framework. Brussels is described as genuinely enthusiastic. The foundation of a post-American global trade system is being put together in real time by the very countries that were supposed to be America's economic core. There is a precedent for what happens when America walks away from its partners. And it is not ancient history. In 2018, when Trump launched his first wave of tariffs and pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the remaining 11 nations, including Japan, Canada, and Australia, did not give up. They kept going without America. They changed the name of the agreement, they put it into effect, and it now covers hundreds of billions in annual trade. America chose to leave. Everyone else stayed at the table. What Carney is doing right now is a much larger version of that same move. He is not just keeping an existing deal alive. He is actively connecting 2 massive trade systems, the EU and the CPTPP, into something that would be the largest trade structure since the Bretton Woods Agreement. And the stated goal, according to Canadian officials on the record, is to build something strong enough to handle pressure from the United States. That is not my analysis. That is what they are saying openly. I know some of you are thinking, this is interesting, but what does it actually mean for me? For my paycheck, my grocery bill, my family? Here is the answer, and it is not comfortable. Start with the dollar. When global demand for US dollars drops, the dollar loses value. When the dollar loses value, everything you import costs more. Your phone, your medication, your clothing, your car, the coffee you are drinking right now. All of it is priced somewhere along the supply chain in dollars. All of it gets more expensive when the dollar loses buying power. The dollar's share of global reserves has already dropped from 72% in 2000 to under 60% today. That is not a cliff, it is a slope. But every trade deal that routes around the dollar pushes it further down that slope. And the EU-CPTPP framework that Carney is building right now is specifically designed to trade in other currencies: pounds, euros, yen, Canadian dollars, not the American dollar. Every transaction in that framework is one that does not require anyone to hold US dollars. And when countries need fewer dollars, they buy fewer US Treasury bonds. When demand for Treasury bonds drops, the interest rates on those bonds have to rise to attract buyers. And when those rates rise, your mortgage rate goes up, your car loan goes up, your credit card interest goes up. Trump did not raise your borrowing costs through a deliberate decision. He raised them through behavior, through the total effect of every threat and every broken relationship that pushed America's allies toward financial infrastructure that skips Wall Street entirely. Now, the jobs piece, which I think actually matters most here. One of the main arguments for Trump's tariffs has been protecting American manufacturing jobs. And look, I get that instinct. There are real towns in this country that lost real industries to trade deals over the past 30 years. That hurt people. That pain is real. But here is what is not being discussed honestly. The countries now building alternative trade systems include some of America's biggest customers for manufactured goods, the UK, Canada, Australia, Japan, Germany. If those countries deepen their own supply chains, if a Canadian manufacturer buys steel from Australia instead of the US, if a British company sources parts from Singapore instead of Ohio, if a Japanese automaker builds its supply chain through Vietnam instead of Tennessee, American factories lose orders, not overnight, but steadily, measurably. Tariffs can protect your home market. They cannot protect your export markets. And you cannot grow manufacturing in this country if the rest of the world is actively building supply chains that go around you. Now, here is the scenario that deserves the most serious attention of everything I have said today. Five Eyes, the intelligence alliance between the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. This is not just an agreement. It is the most deeply connected intelligence sharing arrangement ever created. These five nations share raw signals intelligence, the actual intercepts, the actual analysis, at a level that makes every other intelligence relationship on Earth look like two strangers exchanging business cards. It works because of trust. Complete, foundational, unconditional trust that shared intelligence will never be used as a weapon. Now, there are reports that Trump has, at various points, threatened to cut off intelligence cooperation as a bargaining chip in trade talks with Australia and Canada. Think about what that actually means. The moment you threaten to withhold intelligence unless someone gives you a trade deal, you have just told every partner in the alliance that intelligence sharing is conditional, that it can be shut off, that it is a tool, not a promise. And once you have said that, once you have shown that intelligence is a bargaining chip, the entire foundation of trust that makes Five Eyes function starts to break down. Not all at once, gradually, quietly, at the institutional level, where no press release announces the damage. If Britain, Canada, and Australia start limiting what they share with Washington, if GCHQ begins running its most sensitive analysis through a Commonwealth-only channel, American intelligence goes partially blind. In a world where the threats from China, Russia, Iran, and non-state actors are more complex than at any point since the Cold War, partially blind is catastrophic. I see two realistic paths playing out at the same time. The first, Trump escalates. More tariffs, more pressure, more confrontational talk, and every single escalation becomes a recruitment pitch for Carney's coalition. Every tariff on a Canadian product is an argument for why Canada needs the EU-CPTPP connection. Every threat toward Australia is evidence that Australia needs alternative security partnerships. Every insult directed at Britain is a reason to take Kanzuk more seriously. Trump's approach is structurally doing Carney's recruiting for him. The coalition grows not despite the pressure, but because of it. The second path, Washington recalibrates. Someone in the administration actually looks at what is being built. The EU-CPTPP talks, the Kanzuk momentum, the Beijing visits, the supply chain restructuring, and concludes that the long-term cost of this behavior is too high, that America is trading lasting global influence for short-term political performance, and a real negotiation begins, not a photo op meeting, a real serious conversation about tariff rules, intelligence sharing agreements, and the terms under which these countries are willing to stay inside an American-led economic system. But here is the catch. The longer this goes, the more that new framework gets built without America, the higher the price of getting back in. Every month that the EU-CPTPP talks move forward, American leverage drops. Every Commonwealth supply chain that gets locked in is one that has no reason to reverse course. The countries shaded in blue on that map did not switch sides. They built their own side. And the question I keep coming back to, the one I honestly do not have an answer to, is whether this administration is capable of understanding what it has set in motion before the new architecture becomes permanent. I could be wrong about the timeline. I could be off on the scale. But I do not think I am wrong about the direction. America's oldest allies are doing something they have never done in modern history. They are building toward a future where American partnership is one option among many, not the only option that matters. Where does that lead? I genuinely want to know what you think.